Hey, all my Spirit Tribe family. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Spiritual Chemist Podcast. Today, we are talking about fear. You guys absolutely will not want to miss this one. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Today, as I said, we are talking about fear. As always, I don't want to waste any time. Let's get right into it. Fear dominates our whole lives. We literally live in a reality of fear. So, I just want to start off telling you a little bit about my story of fear and how fear has permeated my life. I've always had this fear of heights. I don't know why. I don't know if it just seems unfounded that I have this fear of heights. And I just always have. And I've flown on planes before. And I just kind of felt like that was a necessary evil that I had to do that to get from point A to point B. You know, it's never like I really experienced any anxiety or anything like that on flights, as I was flying, but it was just the thought. And that's a huge thing we're going to really get into is the thought of what could happen, a future event that could happen. So that's just one thing that was always really big for me. I've also gone through anxiety at one point when I had started on this spiritual journey. And just as you grow more, you go through this dark night of the soul. And that is a real thing. I experienced that. And I went through anxiety and depression. The first time I had ever gone through that. And thankfully, the only time I went through it, my life is amazing, at this point. And, I'm so grateful for every day. And, love permeates every portion of my life. I mean, I still have fears, but, I work on those as I recognize them. But I did go through, a part of my life where it was a dark night of the soul, and it was scary. It was scary. I really had to sit with myself and face myself. And there were times when it was scary just looking in the mirror, It was that was a definitely rough patch in my life, but that is something that you go through on your spiritual journey. And it's growth. It's growth. It's scary, but that's what we're talking about is fear, right? So we take that and we move forward. So that's just a little bit of my story, but we're going to go ahead and get into, the topics that we're going to talk about today. So there's a saying that goes, tell me what your fears are, and I'll tell you who you are. Tell me who you are, and I'll tell you what your fears are. This is because who you're identified as is based on your fears. And your fears are defined by who you identify as. So some examples of that are like, being a parent, being a husband or a wife, being an employee. All of these things are your ego or your identity that you have created. And they're tied to your fears. And the reason that they're tied to your fears is because as a parent, you fear certain things for your children, right? Or as a husband or wife, you fear certain things for your wife or for your husband. There's certain things that come with those. As an employee, you could fear losing your job. And people look at those things as minor things, but those are actually huge fears because they're everyday fears, right? They're They're not, I mean, although they're small, they permeate your life every day. So those are definite fears that you have. So, a question that you have is, would that mean that identifying as a human comes with its own set of fears as well? Well, of course. But the real question is, are we even human? I know that, people are going to hear that and like, what do you mean, are we human? Of course we're human. But I challenge that, because what is a human anyway? We are not human. We are actually divine spiritual energy having a human experience. We are love, as I talked about in the Love podcast. So we are not humans, but we have a human vessel. And, we fear the things that are detrimental to our physical survival, the ego, the identity, the human body, right? So what is the ego then? The ego is the identity that you created or have been creating since birth. It's a collection of all the things, that we identify with. Like I said earlier, a parent, a child, a student, all of those things we identify with. And each of these identities come with their own set of fears. Remember that in the last podcast, we talked about how you have to separate the ego to experience more love. And as it turns out, fear and love go hand in hand. As I was finding this information out, it was just crazy to me, to see how much love and fear go together. It's crazy. But all fear boils down to fear of the loss of the ego or identity, meaning that you fear losing who you identify as. So if you're an employee or a husband or a wife or any of those things, you fear things that go against that identity because you don't want to lose that identity, right? So the things that you fear are things that go against that. So we're going to get into what fear is. Fear is a self-control mechanism, meaning fear is there to help you maintain whatever it is you identify with, right? It's there to help you maintain whatever you believe you are. And what does this mean? It means that fear helps you maintain your identity on many different levels and aspects, including work, business, politics, finances, sexual intimate relationships, religion, and many more. There's just lots of different things that you identify with, on that level. Fear is survival at its basic roots. Survival of the ego or identity. And fear is not a natural thing. He said that love is a natural thing and not a human quality. Well, fear is not a natural thing. And it's also imaginary, meaning that it's not real. It only appears real. Remember, fear is false evidence appearing real. All fear is a lack of consciousness, meaning the more things that you fear, the less conscious you are, and the less fear you have, the more conscious that you are. And, we'll get into that more as far as like what all of this really means to you. Fear is resistance to a future experience. So you hold this resistance in your body when you have this fear. And the future experience is you're always projecting out to something that could happen in the future. So that just basically means that it's something that has not happened yet or likely never will happen. So you're fearing something that is basically not relevant. And we also have to remember that everything is energy, including fear. But fear is such a low vibrational energy that it causes resistance, whereas love is such a high vibrational energy that it just flows. So love is flowing, moving energy, whereas fear is stagnant and resistant energy. You can think of it as like a light switch, right? You flip the light switch on, you have love, you get light, flowing energy. You flip the light off, you have fear, resistant, and non-flowing energy. It's like a resistor that you have, on the light switch. That resistor, when you flip that light off, that energy, it just builds up and it stops at one point, and it's just energy that's stagnant until you flip that switch back on, and then it can flow again. So love and fear is a lot like that. Fear is also equal to conditional happiness, whereas love is unconditional happiness. So for example, when you have fear that your mate will leave you, you put conditions on your love so as to not get hurt, other than just truly, unconditionally loving your mate and understanding that, yes, there is the possibility that that may happen, but I don't fear this, and I'm going to love this person unconditionally. And when you have that, I think the reality of that actually happening is less to nothing. So we have to really just be mindful of what we're given over to fear. Are we controlled by this fear? Well, of course, there's lots of individuals that try to control us through fear. That's an everyday thing. We're controlled by fear through the media, through religion, politics, all those things. When we are told that we are only human, that further legitimizes the fears that you have, because you believe you're a human and you identify as a human. So your identity is a human and you identify as that. So when you're told that you're only human, that can be a scary thing, because being a human comes with its own set of fears, right? So we are definitely controlled through these mechanisms. We're controlled through toxic relationships. When we know that we shouldn't be in a certain relationship, but we continue to stay because of whatever circumstances, and those circumstances do not warrant you staying, but that's called attachment. And attachment can be a control, whether or not you make conscious decisions or not. So attachment is a control mechanism because you stay somewhere, or you continue to do something that is not conducive, and you do that out of fear. So it alters your decision making, and you're not able to consciously do anything out of your right mind because of the fear and the attachment. So that's another mechanism of control. We're going to get into some examples of how fear and consciousness, all these things work, right? Because this is the huge part of everything, how all of this works. What you fear, you hold on to. You bring more into reality. Meaning the resistance that you have building up is causing whatever it is you fear to manifest in your life, because you are radiating that energy, right? So what you're holding on to, you bring more into reality. So the thing that you fear the most, and you're not letting go of that, meaning you're not just letting it flow, embracing that fear and feeling that fear and just surrendering to it. When you hold on to it, it becomes something that stores up in your body. And it's an energy that stores up in your body. And then that energy ends up manifesting in your reality because it's stored there and it's not going anywhere. So you draw that reality to you. The reality that you do not want and you fear manifesting, you actually manifest. So that's one thing that we kind of have to, understand as far as, conscious manifestation versus unconscious manifestation. Once you let go of the resistance, you let go of the fear, and the fear goes away because It's no longer being stored in your body. So once you let go of the resistance, you let go of the fear, and the fear goes away because it is no longer being stored in your body by the resistance of the fear that you were holding on to. So what that simply means is you just have to embrace it. You have to feel that feeling and then let it go. Be with it. But we'll get into that more. What you resist persists. And again, this is based on the fear causing blockages in your body. What you resist, a resistance, persists. It stays in your body. So whatever it is that you fear stays jammed up inside of you until you decide to face this fear in some way, right? So why aren't we taught what fear actually is? Well, once you start to get lots of your fears mastered, you start to become uncontrollable. And we all know that an uncontrollable person is not ideal to a lot of individuals. You're not easily manipulated. And you begin to question reality more and more. And I can 100% vouch for this. I've experienced these things myself. And uncontrollable and spirituality awakened masses are not good for the power structures for obvious reasons. You know, they have to be able to control the masses. And everyone is controlled through fear. So when your consciousness is low and your spiritual development is low, when you decide to face the thing that you fear the most, it will probably be just as bad as you imagined because you haven't released enough of the resistance that you had stored up as fear. Some call it going through the dark night of the soul, which is what I explained, just earlier. When you start to sit with all these fears that have plagued you for years, these fears, have been stored up in you for years, and there's blockages because of these stored up fears that are stored in you for years. So you go through this dark night of the soul, and when you go through these, you can experience anxiety and depression, but it is a necessary step in growing more spiritually. Do you ever notice that when you fear something, there's an image in your mind of what could potentially happen? I know I have. Every time I'm up high and I'm looking down, I'm thinking about falling, right? So I know for me, it's a huge thing. Well, what's happening is that your mind is projecting out into a future event that will likely never happen. So the fear is unfounded because it's not real. You're projecting out something that is probably never going to happen. If you take a lot of your fears that you've projected out, how many of them have come true? How many of them have actually happened, right? Probably slim to none. Which is why, rather than reacting to the fear, sit with it and feel the feeling of the fear. And yes, it does feel yucky. It does feel bad. If you actually sit with fear and feel the fear, you will know that it doesn't feel good. But when you sit with it, you know what that feeling is, and you're able to surrender and just let that fear go. And that energy, it's like an energy release. So how do we recognize fear? Well, being mindful of it as it's happening, because fear is not a thought, it's a feeling. And you can actually feel fear. Now, what happens is your mind projects a thought, which further legitimizes this fear. But fear is not the thought. Fear is an actual feeling that you feel. So to recognize it, You just have to be mindful of it and recognize it as it's happening. Another way you can recognize fear is present is by the health conditions that arise due to years of built up resistance. This stored energy that is blocked in your body, for so long. Some of these health problems may include panic attacks, anxiety, heart attacks, nervous breakdowns, stroke, mental illness, sexual problems, obesity, insomnia, and there's so many more that can happen to you just because of fear, right? We think it's other things, but a lot of times it's just the blockage from fear. You know what I mean? So that's another way that we can recognize what fear is. So why do we get anxiety and panic attacks? Well, the reason that we get panic and anxiety attacks, in my opinion, when we experience fear, we automatically go to this place in our mind, and our mind makes this fear out to be a terrible thing. That in turn validates the fear even more. And then you go into this like tailspin where you're unable to control your feelings and emotions, and that just brings on anxiety and panic attacks even more. The key is to try to stay present as much as possible. When we are in those moments, we have to give ourselves back to the present moment, because in those moments, we are projecting out into the future, which is not come. So we have to always be present. And when we're experiencing these anxiety attacks and panic attacks, all of these things, we have to breathe and come back to the present moment, because most of the time we're projecting out into a future that has not happened yet. And like I said, probably will never happen. So we have to just, in those moments, be in tune and come back to the present moment, consciousness, and understanding who we truly are, our true self, and what is our true self. So, we talked about the ego and how we think that is who we really are. But now we're going to get more into who we truly are, which is self or love. So we talked about the ego and how we think that is who we really are. But now we're going to get more into who we truly are, which is self or love. And what is self? What is your true self? It's everything. And fear also boils down to fear of self. Let that sink in. Fear boils down to fear of self. So, self/love, whatever you want to call it, is everything. The good, the bad, the happy, the sad. Complete consciousness, the entire universe manifesting itself into the human body and taking on an identity and an ego in order to experience more of itself. And that is what we are. We are this self, this love. And if you're listening to my voice right now, understand that on a deeper level, you're not listening to me, you're listening to yourself, because we are all one. So I'm actually talking to myself, and you are listening to yourself. True self, that is. Now, isn't that profound? In this physical realm, we have this separation, so we think that I'm me and you're you. But when we understand who we truly are, which is love and self, we're all that same thing. So we're all one. But we're individualized by human bodies, which we are not human bodies. So, yeah, that's very profound. And this is what we really fear, is ourselves and how great we really are. Just how great we really are. That's what we really fear, is ourselves. So, self is also the human body, but it's not the human body. Self also includes all the things that you fear and all reality. So, let that sink in as well. We are everything. And the self also includes the things that you fear. All of this reality. When you let go of the fears by facing or embracing them, you are accepting more of your true self and getting back closer to who you really are, which is all things, right? So as we let go more of the fears, on a daily basis, we are making a conscious effort to let go of this fear, to let go of this fear. What we are doing is becoming more of our true identity in those times, and we're becoming more love and more love-based and less human, right? We're not human to begin with, but we recognize, in those moments that we're doing this work, that we are becoming more spirit, love, and less ego, right? So in this love simulator we call life, and I say love simulator because we are love, and we are thrown into this abyss of fear, right? Where we have fears for everything in the physical reality, but we are love. So there's the paradox. But in this love simulator we call life, it's pushing you into merging with your true self. So are you resisting this fear, or are you embracing it by becoming more love and letting go of fear? That's the question. Most don't want to accept or acknowledge who they truly are because it requires work on their part. And it's too hard. Spiritual work is it's not the easiest thing to do, And as a matter of fact, it's not easy at all. So, I won't make any miscues about that. It's not easy at all, but it's worth it because what you experience is love, and when you experience the true love, it's amazing. It's amazing. So we have to do this self-work, which is conquering fears. To conquer your fear, you must expand your sense of self. And the true self is the total absence of fear. Completely. Just completely gone. Total acceptance, oneness, infinite love, truth, selflessness, consciousness, and peace. True self is consciousness that has totally accepted itself. Now, in the human form, or the ego, or the identity, whatever you want to call it, we are consciousness that has not fully accepted itself. So if we still identify with any part of being a human in the human experience, we're consciousness that has not fully accepted itself. And that's okay. That's okay. But as long as we are attached to something in the physical, there will always be fear, because to totally transcend fear, you must basically give up your complete identity and ego and who you think you are. And most just aren't willing to do this. Most people are not willing to give up their identity, complete identity, and surrender to totally transcending. I don't know if you've ever watched the series Game of Thrones. If you have, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, go and watch it, right? So there's a character on there. Her name is Arya, and she had to become no one to become everyone. So as she was going through this process of becoming no one to become everyone, she was giving up her identity and her ego. And if you remember, she went blind, she was beaten, but when she became a master, she was able to take on multiple identities. This is because she transcended fear and merged with the all and didn't fear her true self. So she was able to be all things in the physical as well. If you want a good example of what I'm talking about and you haven't watched it, just go watch it, as I said. But I will say that it's later on in the seasons. It's not right away. It's something that happens later on in the seasons, but it's definitely worth watching because it has a lot to do with, fears that we have to overcome. So, what should our goal be then? In this whole thing, if we know that we have to completely give up our identity, if we want to completely transcend into oneness and completely eradicate fear, which is really hard to do, and most people don't want to do that, what should our goal be? Well, I know what my goals are, but I can't speak for everyone. But in general terms, like I said, most people don't want to give up their full identity. So their goal should be to just have more control of your life and stop letting life happen to you and be the cause of the life that you have. So don't live life on accident. Live life on purpose. Be the purpose in your life. And you can do this just by continual self-improvement, by letting go of your fears, becoming more of your true self day by day. The more the fears you face, the more you merge with your true self. So, how can we overcome fear? Well, seeking truth helps you transcend fear. Truth seeking in everything, because truth sets you free and makes you free. And when you're free, there can be no fear because you recognize what it is. Fear is the unknown, right? So, and what something that could potentially happen that hasn't happened. So as you seek truth, you're transcending this fear. Another way is detachment from the ego, as we've said numerous times. Some things that are easy to detach from, like your car, your home, or your job, some of those things are easy to detach from, while others are extremely difficult, like being a parent, or detaching from your family or friends, or detaching yourself from the identity of even being a human. That is extremely hard to do, right? But that is also a way to transcend and overcome fear. You have to dominate the feeling that you get when you experience fear and act in a conscious way rather than an unconscious way. So as we're experiencing fear, we have to just sit with it and let it just be with the fear. And rather than reacting, act in a conscious way rather than in an unconscious way, right? And surrendering to the fear is also another way that we let go of the fear. Allowing yourself, as I said, to just be with the fear and, literally just stew in the fear pretty much. Like just be with it and experience the feeling. What makes you strong is to surrender, not resistance. Your inability or, unwillingness to surrender to your fears are what actually make you weak. Because as we said earlier, there's so many health conditions that come with built up resistance of fear. So that actually makes you weak. Whereas when you surrender to the resistance and just sit with your fear or face your fears, that makes you stronger because you have this flowing energy that's radiating through you. So it really does help you to face these fears. by realizing that fear is an illusion and fear is not real. Fear is meant to make you more conscious. By recognizing the fear and handling it in a conscious way, that's ultimately what fear is for, is to make us more conscious. And it's, like I said earlier, it's also a survival mechanism as well, for the human. But for the spirit, the love portion of us, it's actually to make us more conscious of who we really are. You already know that the essence of who we really are is love. So being love, we are put through this reality of fear that drops who we really are down to this base level, right? And then we begin to form an identity or an ego. And the ego solidifies who we think we are. And then we become afraid of the things that challenge who we think we are. Rather than accepting these things and letting them flow and pass, we put up resistance so we can never grow back to our full potential of being love until we succumb to the fear. And succumbing to the fear doesn't mean that you just let the fear happen or whatever. Succumbing to the fear means more of just being with the fear or facing the fear to just be with the fear, right? Another way that we can overcome fear is by putting yourself in challenging situations where you have to face your fear. And you can do these things daily. Just put yourself in challenging situations and see how that helps you. Being present as much as possible is also another way that we can overcome fear. Being present. Being present is hard to do at a lot of times, but like when you're experiencing fear, just become present. And when you become present, you can feel the fear and you recognize what fear feels like. And then you can take that and build off of it. Breath work. As you feel the fear, remember to breathe. Breath work is huge. Just breathing, taking deep breaths and feeling your breath, going in and out, just breathing. And then becoming aware of, different body parts as you're breathing and just relaxing those. So that's another way that you can overcome fear, right? Being positive. A positive mind leaves no room for fear. So positivity, when you fill your mind up with positivity, I see so many, people like on social media now, and they talk about people being fake positive and stuff like that. But, my philosophy on that is, fake it until you make it. Don't criticize anyone for being fake positive. I mean, why would you criticize somebody for being positive? If even if they are being fake positive, at least they're not being negative, right? I mean, at least they're trying to put out good energy into the universe. So everybody, just being real, everybody has bad days. And maybe these individuals choose not to post about their bad days. They only post about the good days. And there's nothing wrong with that. So in my opinion, I see no problem with that. Being positive is a great thing. And, I'll say the one other thing, there's many other things, but for me, the one ultimate thing that can overcome fear is love. Practice being love, as we talked about in the previous podcast. Practice being love and being grateful and being thankful for your life. I told you guys, that I'm grateful for every day. I thank you guys for listening to my podcast. I appreciate you guys so much. It's just being thankful and it's just being grateful for your life. And as you become more grateful and more thankful for your life, the things that you want to happen in your life start to happen so much easier and flow so much smoother when the resistance from fear is gone. And the resistance from fear is love. And love is who we truly are. So you have this reality that we are in, which is fear-based, and then you have who we truly are, which is love. And we have to, balance those. It's all about balance. It's crazy how everything always goes back to balance. But where you have love in your heart, there's no room for fear. There's no room for fear at all. So just remember that, love is one of the most powerful forms to eliminate fear. And so we're going to be coming to a close here. But as we come to a close, just know your whole life, you are facing yourself, your true self. And that's ultimately what we fear. We fear how great we truly are. I mean, can you believe that? We fear how great we truly are. You're so great that you're scary, right? Like the essence of who we are, which is true self, love, which is all things. It's so great that it's scary. So you think that you fear all the bad things because they're bad or evil, but what you really fear is neither. But what you fear is the realization that there is no bad or evil, just infinite love. And you fear dissolving into love because love leaves no room for the ego. So ultimately what we fear is love. And when you dissolve into complete love, it's like an ego death, the death of your identity. And as I said, many people aren't willing to have the death of their identity, so they fear love. They fear love. You fear love. And that, that's very powerful. We fear love. So ultimately at the end of the day, we have to not fear dissolving into the love more and more. And the more we dissolve into love, the more we become truly who we really are. And the more that we don't identify with this reality. So to succeed in life, you need fearlessness. And fearlessness can also be called love, consciousness, or courage. All of those go hand in hand. You know who we are. You know that we're love. You know that we're infinite spiritual. You know that we're true self. And most people don't want to completely identify as, true self. They don't want to completely identify as love. But just know you can't avoid yourself forever, right? So everybody's time will come where they have to make the decision where I want to be complete love. So in closing, I thank you guys so much for listening to this version of the podcast, Fear. You guys leave me your thoughts, your comments, and remember to follow, like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on YouTube at Spiritual Chemist, Instagram at spiritual_chemist85. And you can also listen to my podcasts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But before we go, I want to leave you guys with a message from Sadhguru. But until next time, be love, be peace, be light, and be a spiritual chemist. Thank you guys so much for listening.
The fear is simply because you are not living with life. You are living in your mind. Your fear is always about what's going to happen next. That means your fear is always about that which does not exist. If your fear is about the non-existent, your fear is 100% imaginary. If you're suffering the non-existential, we call that insanity. So people may be in just socially accepted levels of insanity, But if you're afraid or if you're suffering anything which does not exist, it amounts to insanity, isn't it? People are always suffering, either what happened yesterday or what may happen tomorrow. So your suffering is always about that which does not exist, simply because you're not rooted in reality. You're always rooted in your mind. Mind is, one part of it is memory, another part of it is imagination. Both of them are in one way imagination, because both of them don't exist right now. You're lost in your imagination. That's the basis of your fear. If you were rooted in reality, there would be no fear. So, when you're not in fear, just stay like that. Because to create fear, you have to use excessive imagination. To not be in fear, you don't have to do anything. Fear is happening because of excessive imagination. Things that have not happened, you're creating. What may happen in your mind happens in 1,000 different formats. And most probably it never happens. The things that you feared, take 100 things that you have feared. Probably 99 of them never happened, isn't it? Yes. So your fear is always about that which does not exist. You cannot fight or you cannot overcome that which does not exist.